Hello, good afternoon. My name is Joe Williams. It's nice to see everyone here this afternoon. Now, what does this mean? Ooh, okay. Well, I received that. Thank you all so much for joining us for this very special offering. I am so pleased and delighted to be able to introduce Lee because one of the first professional opportunities that I had to present a masterclass was at Seattle University. And the person who hosted, printed the programs on my behalf and prepared students and greeted me with such warmth was Lee Peterson. And I'll never forget how gracious of a host you were and how during that class that I was giving, you held space for my knowledge to be received with honor. So I'm very thrilled, and I also am appreciative of the wonderful curatorial council of our senior pastor. I hope those of us who hold responsibility to remember our senior pastor will know her legacy of cultural work in the city of Seattle. And that being said, please welcome Lee Peterson.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me without being blurred? I make sure that my tempo is not vivace. Oh my goodness. I passed this building about 10,000 times since moving to Seattle, and I had not been in it. And wow, Reverend Kelly, what a sermon. Whew. You were looking over my shoulder because that was what I needed to hear today. And Joe, and I thank you all for the opportunity to come and share a little bit with you. It's funny when you say you're going to speak about a topic, there's a temptation to get this thing in your head as I'm speaking ex cathedra from on high. Actually, I'm not. I'm actually speaking from in mud because it's an ongoing process and there is no final word. So what I'm sharing basically is kind of a live stream from life, reflections on things. In June of this year, 2023, after a very long time at Seattle U, and I first walked through those doors in 1999 as a student in the School of Theology and Ministry, getting the Matt's degree, and transforming spirituality, which always made me feel like, you know, those little robot dolls, transformers. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be a transformer for spirituality, but it was the beginning of a long association. And then what society calls retiring. After many years working with Joy Sherman in the choirs, I call it redirection. Retirement has a connotation for me that is not pleasant. So I would like to say that I redirected and then gave at the end of June, the beginning of June, a program at Seattle U that was Words and Music #1. And planning that program was odd. I had music that I had written that was on the program, and the 6-4 singers, a group of volunteer choir alums and folk that sang 2 of my pieces, and then I talked and played. And it was kind of odd to be having that in the chapel. It was like, who's read Tom Sawyer? It was kind of like, you know, when Tom Sawyer goes to his own funeral, being at your own memorial service, that it had, planning that program was kind of like that, thinking, okay, my memorial service. But today, what I'd like to do is to talk and play. So, words and music about creativity and spirituality. And it's kind of become trendy, creativity stuff. And everybody has, spirituality. But what I'd like to talk about today is to share some of the personal experiences that I have had with it. So it's not, to me, it's not an it. It's not a thing you write books about, although people have written about it, and people have written about dimensions of it. But I'm thinking of how am I experiencing this in my life, and how can we collectively and individually experience that in our own lives? We live in a world of monetization and quantification. I'm going to sit. So I'm going to be like Franklin Roosevelt's fireside chat. We live in a world of monetization. Everything has a price. Everything's quantified. And sometimes when that happens, there's nothing wrong with making money, but there is a thing that happens when it can get stirred into other dimensions of our personality that is not always, it doesn't always serve. When I make things, when I'm wearing things that I made. And I've shown them to people, or I wear them, and they say, "Oh, I like your X. Did you make it?" And I'll say, "Yes." And they'll say, "Do you have a website? Do you have an Etsy? And, where's your business card?" And I say, "Hey, wait a minute. I've made a lot of hats, a couple of hundred hats, and I think those hats were not made, that's not why I made them." Therapy, sort of. There are people who are walking the earth alive today because I know how to crochet. And having those things happen, for me, it's a spiritual practice. That's one of the dimensions of it. That I'm not making it, quote, to monetize it, although if I do, it wouldn't hurt me to do that. I mean, I've given them, sold a couple of things to raise money for something. But when I think I'm only making it to make some money off it, that can, in my case, seep into my personality in a way that activates other things that don't quite serve. But we live in that kind of a culture. We do anything and everybody wants to know, "Hey, you got a website?" I think in terms of the Gospel of Thomas, I think it's Logion 47 that says, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." And that to me is part of touching on the whole idea of creativity. Creativity is not something that we do. "Oh, so-and-so is so creative. He's a cook. She's a gardener. She is a jewelry maker. She writes books." We all think of those things a lot when we think about being creative. We think about products, what you made, what you did, what you wrote. It's also helpful, though, to think of it as process. And that to me links with a form of theology that I studied in STM, the famous process theology, which, you know what? There was a book that we were supposed to read. But I'll tell you, the book that really helped me with process theology was a book by Octavia Butler. It was a novel called Parable of the Sower. God is change. And I thought, hey, that's it. Process theology, God is change. Shape change, shape God. Where it's a dialogue, it's an ongoing process. So when we think of being creative, we think of something that you are intrinsically. And to me, being creative, or creativity, the act of creation, the process of creation, is part of what we mean when we say that we are made in the image and likeness of God. That one of the primary characteristics is creator. Making from nothing, making from something, but a constant process of change. And that has been, in my own life, the thing. We think, discover God's will for your life. I know everybody has heard that, where you think you're born and God has a plan. And it's all written out, like these note cards, and you just kind of walk through it, and you're supposed to find it, then you're supposed to walk through, and then I'll just tick, 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 like a musical score that's already written out. You don't improvise, play what's on the page. Well, folks, I have news. That didn't work for me. And I was raised to believe that all I had to do was find it and do it, and everything would be fine. Actually, it's actually been more like the Starship Enterprise, where you boldly go and you have no idea what's out there. And half the time, your ship is under attack with a red alert, and the Klingons are cloaked and they're out there. And the making of your life, and you think of the process, it's more like bricolage. And it's a lovely term from what I have done when making things. Bricolage is when you make art or you make something from whatever you got laying around. So you don't go and buy $1,000 worth of stuff, stash it, use recipes, use other people's patterns to make things. It's you're cooking and you think, okay, we need to have dinner. What's in the fridge? You make it from whatever is out there. Bricolage. That's really the way that it's been for me. It hasn't been finding, go to school, you have your family, you get your job, you do your service, you retire, you do this, and then you're gone. It's more like, oh, what's next? Oh my gosh, oh. And how do we deal with this? How do we work around this? What have we got to work with? Working at Seattle U was a lot of bricolage. We didn't have a music degree. People would just come in. We work with what we have and who we have. And we were able in the process of going with the flow and rolling with it to integrate a plan with an actuality and to create, to bring out something that was within us individually and collectively. When I was growing up, I'm the child of makers with a capital M. My father was a minister, my grandfather and great-grandfather, they were Baptist preachers, and my parents were makers. Their number one choice when they needed something for the family was, first, can we make it? Second, is it out there to be bought or traded or bartered or whatever? So I grew up with kind of a bricolage disposition toward making things. I don't think they really thought of this expression as something special. That was just how the people did it in those days. If you needed a dress, you got fabric and you sewed one. Or you took a dress that you already knew and you tweaked it for a special occasion. But your first thought was creating it, making it as an expression and to fill a need. So there's utilitarian. We think of this when we look at the quilts. Amazing quilts made by our moms, our grandmoms. The crochet as being art. Well, yes, art, but it had a purpose. They needed something, so they made it. And they did it. And so that has been part of expression. And I've always thought, make it first. See what you got. What have you got lying around? God says to Moses, what is in your hand? And Moses says, oh, I got a stick. And God says, don't lose that stick. We need to do something with it. And a lot comes from that. But what do you have in your hand? The work of your hands. And so the work of your hands is part of it. The force, the energy, the divine spark, the creativity, the being made in the image of God, part of the image of God is a maker. And that's one of the first things that we learn if you're reading Hebrew scriptures. That's one of the first characteristics of God that comes out. God made something. And we hear that expression first. The book of John, in the beginning was the Word, spoken, generated, coming forth, bringing forth something that was within. So expressing has always been a thing. As you grow, we leave home and we go out on our own, and I wanted to express in a way that was perhaps different from the way my parents did it, but still expression, bringing out what's within you. And for me, that was music. I have little pictures of the little baby LP with her little fat feet and her little hair bow. Standing is about a year and a half, reaching up to touch the piano keyboard. And my parents started noticing things, and we wound up with piano lessons, and it kind of went from bug in a rug all the way to Gaspard de la Nuit. So that was quite a journey. But it's still expressing, even though a lot of what I was expressing other people's love letters to the world in the form of music. So I'm playing music that other people have written. At some point, because I grew up as a preacher's kid, it gets out in the church, you can play the piano, you're going to be up there a lot. And so you're going to be playing by ear, you're going to be picking things up, you're going to be accompanying people who are praying. Black church, we pray in the blues. And you can actually, accompany someone who's praying with the cadence. So we grew up with that. So the fresh music was always a part of it. And there's a thing that happens, though. The expression, you have to be careful. I learned that when I went to school and began to get into contact with other people who were musicians. Yes, we are exercising a creative potential. We're expressing the creativity, the product of composers who, at the time that I was going to school, I think they were all males and they all lived in Europe and they were all dead. But that was music education in those days. And I'm reading, Beethoven's love letter to the world is, a piano sonata or Prokofiev or whatever. And then later in grad school, I find out that there are people of color, there are women who also did that. And people that look like me were also part of it. Not only performers, but generators, makers. And that became part of the creative flow, what I call intake. Bringing out what's part of you. Having intake is important. And intake is everything. One of my improv god, is Keith Jarrett. He doesn't play in public anymore because he had, I believe, 2 strokes and lost the use of his left hand to the point where he can't play in public. But Keith Jarrett is my improv god. Keith Jarrett has enormous intake. He listened to everything. These things swirled around in his psyche and his brain like the tohu bohu before creation, that potential, and out of it came the most amazing improvisations. Creativity on the spot, fresh music. Keith Jarrett would walk on stage, sit down, and start playing. And he would play for an hour, 2 hours, until the little improv switch clicked off, and then he was done. That inspired me to do something very similar, and I've done it on stage at Seattle U, and it's a wild process to improvise fresh music. Walk on stage, the bell rings, start playing, play until the switch clicks off, and you're done. So a process that was not possible without intake. So in a way, the creations of other people also went into the swirling mass of tones and came out as fresh music as part of what I'm doing. However, there is a danger, and here is the danger. The danger is idolatry. Musicians are performers of all kinds. We're susceptible to it. Just the process by which we develop the gift carries within it the seed of idolatry. What is idolatry? STM, Michael Rashko, this is his definition. I've never forgotten it. To be idolatrous is to absolutize the finite. That's how he put it. What that means is something that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, to make that your number one, the center of your existence. And musicians, we do that. We're tempted to do it, to absolutize the finite. And we say, well, music is everything. Well, no. My children are everything. My career is everything. The things that I make are everything. Well, no. Absolutizing the finite is not a good thing. And I will tell you that in my own life, I always had to work, still working to not let that happen. And at a point where I was sliding into that, a couple of things happened that propelled me out of it. And I will share about those things. But let me just start with a poem. This is a poem that I memorized 50 years ago, so I'm an old person. I memorized this poem 50 years ago, and it has stuck with me. And I'm reading little cues off a note card because it was 50 years ago. But this is what I had built my musical life around. He wrote, "To God, eternal song I dedicate, sure motion of my fingers on the keys. My body, but the human instrument which through his cosmic force is animate, to speak of Edens and Gethsemanes in notes that ring with glory or lament. As a musician, I'm competent. My well-trained fingers move with skillful ease because the Lord has given me this gift. Felt padded mauls and taut steel strings. With these, God leads me to interpret and create music to comfort, sadden, soothe, and lift. To God, my hands, and God's applause is swift. The Spirit fills, His grace will consecrate." It's a poem called Dedication. And that was kind of my marching orders. That was what I felt was God's plan for my life. Well, bricolage, things happened. As part of the making was, I came to Seattle. I decided to remake my life. At the time, I was teaching at Baylor in Waco, Texas. And, it was a good gig. I had a car, I was making money, I was on stage most of the time. I used to hang my concert clothing behind the door of my studio because I was on stage so often. And so it was a thing, I was like building my life. I'm creating a life. Well, it got boring. And it got to the point where I began to feel that I was knocking against something that was right here that I couldn't seem to break through. And I thought, midlife crisis, let's move, let's reinvent our life, let's recreate ourselves. So I moved to Seattle. And then, as they say, it all began. One of the things that happened to me in Seattle was the result of some not very informed choices. And so with one thing and another, I wound up working in an office downtown for a retail outfit that I'll just refer to as the Stingy Swedes. And working for the Stingy Swedes, there were people in the Stingy Swede organization who were copywriters. And I thought, how wonderful. I came here to write. I'm going to write my books. I'm going to remake my life. And I was working for a very small amount of money for a very long number of hours a day, with the transit, and thinking, this is how I will get out. I'll practice writing by becoming a copywriter for the Stingy Swedes. So I submitted some of my writing to apply, and it didn't happen. Well, that actually turned out to be a blessing in disguise. If that had happened, there were many things that would not have happened. That bricolage, using what you have at hand. So it didn't happen. There was a drive to make things, to distract myself from what I would call a negative creation. At some point in the Stingy Swede experience, I began to feel that I had destroyed my life. So it was negative creation, that what was in me was not coming out in the way that it had been coming out, and that it was turning inwards. And that was unpleasant. But because I also had fallen into the trap of absolutizing the finite, I felt my life was, kind of over, and what to do from there. All around me, I saw monetization. The copywriter's job was persuading people to spend money that they didn't really have in order to buy things that they did not really need to impress people whom they did not like. So if I had fallen into that, other things that were good for me and for other people through me would not have happened. With one thing and another, I came to Seattle U, and then a door opened, and I met Joy, and I was practicing, and Joy was roaming the halls and heard me playing, and ears plugged. She just walked in, introduced herself, and SU Choirs, an absolutely transformative experience that lasted for around 20 years. If I had become a copywriter, I might have never been laid off, and if I had not been laid off, I would never have thought of Seattle U. And so the bricolage was that in the plan of God for my life, that was like a wild card. And so I thought, okay, uno. The experience of a job where I'm back in music, but I'm not just teaching piano. In fact, at the beginning of my stay at Seattle U, up until about the last year, I did not teach piano. I was working with singers. I was writing music. I was helping people with rehearsals, conducting a little bit, planning pizza feeds, 38 pizzas, big truck tire pizzas, expanding and experiencing the creative energy in ways that I had never thought I would experience to relate to other people. All of that happened after being laid off from the stingy Swedes. So we say we never know how the bricolage is going to work out in our lives. And that led to something that was so transformative. That's how I met Reverend Kelly in STM at a church service. And she was singing, and I was going to play piano for her, right on King Jesus. And then look, so the bricolage, where the making of life is co-creation. We do some, God does some, but we have to do it together in order for it to really happen. So, what I would like to do for you now, I'm going to share some music. And some of the music I'm going to share is a piece that I wrote for the SU choirs. I'm sharing this to show you that this is a type of creative expression that when I was at Baylor, it was not happening. It happened here as a result of bricolage. When I was working at another office job at an outfit I'll just call Death and Decay, I was working for them, and Joy called me up on the phone in the afternoon and asked me to write a mass. And I thought, well, how about a missa brevis? No credo. No credo. Credos are very long, lots of words. So it has 4 movements. One of these movements is the Sanctus, where the text is in English and Latin. It's for soprano, lead, and chorus, like a backup group. The text is, Holy, holy, holy art thou, God of hosts. Heaven and earth are filled with your glory. Hosanna in the highest. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. Oh, gospel doxology precedes this. unpleasant. That, oh, thanks. A phone call that came to me at an office job that was an unpleasant experience, but the phone call led to something, and it led by ways, highways and byways, it led to this. So the bricolage, if someone had told me when I started STM, you're going to be writing a mass, I would have just kind of laughed, because that wasn't part of the plan. But as it happened, things went into the bricolage and it came up. So I keep going back to bricolage because it's what's in your hand? What do you have to work with? And you ask yourself, well, I'm not an author. I don't write music. I don't make jewelry. I don't crochet. I don't, but we're creative. It's part of our nature. It's part of how we're made in imago Dei, in the image of God. It's in everybody. It's the force that through the green fuse drives the flower. Good old English poet who said that. And it is a force. It's related to the sexual energy of creation that is also part of the way we're made in God's image, making. And ask yourself, how am I an expression of the creative energy that we call divine energy? Doesn't just make us like little gingerbread men on a cookie sheet and bake us, and that's it. It's an ever-changing thing that happens, that we're constantly co-creating. That flow never stops. It's always going. However, it's neutral. We can create things that are not what they should be. You never forget this. The same country that gave us Beethoven gave us the Nazis. So that was also a type of creative energy that I would say was destruction wearing the mask of creation. So it goes both ways. So it's an energy that we co-create and shape in ways that promote life, or it can turn and can create, can make, can bring into existence something that is not good at all. So there's choice involved. We say the free will. It happens in our bodies. And we talk about health, creating health. We talk about creating illness. New Age rhymes with sewage. New Age philosophy, quote, teaching says, oh, you make yourself sick. You make yourself healthy. Well, no. But that energy can come out in your body in ways that promote life, and it can turn inward and can turn into something that doesn't promote life. But even that can become the seed of something that does promote life. In scripture that it says, Joseph is talking to his brothers after his whole trip of going through Egypt, being sold into slavery and winding up as Pharaoh's right-hand man. And he tells his brothers, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And so I'm coming to a part of this interminable saga about evil and good. This is a thing that I would not wish on anyone. But as it is happening, the thing I'm about to talk about is turning, and the face of it has changed. Better? Thanks. April 9, 2021. Pandemic, so lockdown, so Zoom class, choir class. Friday morning, I was there on the Hollywood Squares, that is Zoom. The day before I had been vaccinated, I was not feeling too well after the vaccination, and I emailed Joy, and Joy said, let me know, call me. Call me if call me Friday after class. Let me know how you're feeling. Well, I didn't call her after class on Friday. And if Joy says call me, do it. Because Joy will call you. I had lain down to take a nap after class. The next thing I remember is people standing in my bedroom shining a light onto my face. Joy had not heard from me, and she became worried. And she came over with one of her neighbors, who, as it turned out, was an ER physician. With one thing and another, something was wrong. Something was very wrong. I didn't know just how wrong it was until I tried to stand up. I tried to speak, and there was my right hand felt like it belonged to someone else. I'd had a stroke. It wasn't, as they say, the doctors say, well, it was a slight stroke. It's not slight if you have it. It's not slight if you have it. What happened to the promise of that, my marching orders, my absolutizing of the finite? I am the plan for my life. I'm just following the plan for my life. I'm doing all these things. I'm making all these things. Product, right? Well, all of a sudden I got hit with a ball bat. The ball bat hit, as you can tell, I can still play. But Gaspard de la Nuit is no longer in my repertoire, and it will never be again. That began my assurance, my relying on what I thought would always be with me. It left. There is a tendency when those things happen, we think, well, God did it, or God, I had to work through that because there was the feeling of, why did you even give this to me if you're going to take it? And I'm still alive. I had intended to be playing virtuoso piano music on my deathbed, so this was a very unpleasant. Unpleasant doesn't even begin to describe it. I felt like half my body belonged to someone else, someone else's right hand. A wiring problem, a very tiny thing, smaller than a seed bead, was roaming in my bloodstream and got stuck and created a death zone around it and created an amazing amount of havoc in my life that was increased by my feelings toward it. Well, now that channel of expression, of bringing out what is within me, now that channel is being cut off. And when you get past whose fault is it, when you get past, well, did God do it to me? My brother told me something interesting. He said, well, I'm in a church. I don't know, can I say this word, the S word? He said, well, shit happens. It wasn't part of the, quote, divine plan. It was bricolage again, trying to keep making a life with what you have at hand. And all of a sudden, it seemed like I didn't have much in hand at all. It seemed like I didn't have a hand. And with one thing and another at my job, that became an issue because the skill set necessary for accompanying choirs with a conductor, it's a different skill set than playing by yourself or accompanying one person. And it hit that skill set with a ball bat and hammered it. And so, with one thing and another, I decided that I would need to withdraw. I would need to get off the playing board. And that was hard. It was a death. It was a divorce. It was a severing of something. Things that had been built, that I had worked so hard to build, to create, to build, to work with other people. That avenue of creative expression, of bringing forth, all of a sudden that one-way door shut. And I think, where am I going from there? I was still trying to go where I wanted to go. But there's another scripture that I thought of. And I believe it's in the New Testament. When you were younger, you went as you would. You did what you wanted. And now that you have become older, now someone will take you where you may not want to go. And this took me somewhere where I did not want to go. It doesn't do any good to say it can be worse, because you're the one that's living through it. It's bad enough. When one way ends, my father used to say, when one door shuts, another door opens. He also used to say, when one door shuts, another door opens, you need to be better with your carpentry. But when one door shuts, another door opens. So bricolage, what have you got now? What do you have to work now? What I have to work with now is process. Really thinking of the creative energy as a process. Remember, it is change. And to work with what happens now is frightening, and it's also encouraging. Boldly go and make it so, right? I played the Moonlight Sonata because that was part of the experience that I lived through as the recovery began after the betrayal, having to work through the betrayal. And what can I do now? Well, we don't quantify our life, right? We have to live it. In the midst of that, still, in the midst of it, I found something else. What I found was a still point, a quiet place where we could be with ourselves, with the big creator, and in that place to find purpose. They like to say that God doesn't make junk. We've heard that our whole lives, right? I'm me and God don't make junk. Well, here's another part of that. God doesn't make junk. God can make things from junk. What happened to me was that was a junk thing that happened. It didn't mean that I was junk, but all of a sudden I was like 500 pounds of junk that fell on me. But we think, okay, God doesn't make junk intrinsically, but God can make something from the junk. And your life becomes something junky comes into your life, and you need to kind of stop holding on to it. As you said, Kelly, sufficient unto the day, every day will bring some junk. And think, okay, God, what can we make out of this junk to make it not junk? So that's what I am doing now, that I encourage everybody in this room. We all have junk. We also have a creative energy, a force that through the green fuse drives the flower, that can make something from that. What is in us is a thing that was given to us and that is part of who we are. And to bring that forth individually and collectively, we create together. We make things that are bigger than any of us can make by ourselves. So it is a constant process. In the quiet places of our minds and hearts, we find some strength, and we find the crucible or the cauldron of transformation in that quiet place. A poem. There is a quiet place, far from the rapid pace, where God can soothe my troubled mind. Sheltered by tree and flower, there in my quiet hour with Spirit, my cares are left behind. Whether a garden small or on a mountain tall, new strength and courage there I find. Then, from this quiet place, I go prepared to face a new day with love for humankind. Everybody, I leave you with this. We carry that with us and we can contact it. And the energy, the force, the life of making is also a life of being. And in that quiet place, it's born and it thrives. We are creative. We're creations of a creator. We live it. Everything around us is manifested. And within ourselves, we have this, and it is to be brought out. Bringing forth what is within you that will save you and that will connect with the giver of these gifts. So I will end with one more piece of music, and it's a piece called Quiet Place. You know, ulterior motive. This one, and you can see me. You'll see. as they say, stay tuned.
I remember it. I think that we might know what a morning.
Whatever, something.
Okay, do something. I trust you. I trust you. I trust you. Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, help me stand. I am tired. I am weak. I am worn. I am worn through the storm and through the night. Lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me on. When my way grows dear, precious Lord, linger near. When my life is almost gone. Hear my cry, hear my call. Hold my hand, lest I fall. Take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me on. Lead me home.
just like old times. Thank you all so much.